Module 4. Workplace Hazards. Know the hazards in your workplace. One of your jobs as a supervisor is to help plan and organize the work. To do it well, you need to understand the work and the hazards associated with it. You also need to know how to eliminate or control those hazards and to make sure the health and safety program implemented in your workplace is effective in doing so. What is a hazard exactly? A hazard is anything that could hurt you or hurt the people you work with. At the root of every work-related death, injury, or sickness is a hazard of some kind. Hazard can take many forms, and sometimes more than one hazard can combine to make an even bigger hazard. You must know about the hazards in your workplace before you start working to prevent accidents. One common workplace hazard in Ontario is musculoskeletal hazards. This is caused by repeating the same movements over and over, especially if you are in an awkward position or you use a lot of force. This can cause sprains or strains. For example, someone who bends down all day, or someone who lifts heavy things over and over again, especially above the shoulders or below the knees. It can also result from light tasks such as working on the computer for long periods of time with poor posture or repetitive movements. Another common hazard is slipping, tripping, or falling. For example, think of something as simple as spilled coffee on the floor, a cluttered work area, or a raised platform with no guardrails. Additionally, working near motorized vehicles is considered a hazard. For example, someone getting hit by a forklift truck in a warehouse. Additionally, using or working near machinery is a hazard. Another hazard includes workplace violence. This can happen in many workplaces. For example, a gas station attendant working alone at night, or a healthcare worker in those settings. You also need to think about less visible hazards related to your work, such as chemicals, fumes, toxic dust, asbestos, or germs and viruses. Some of these hazards can make you very sick. Sometimes they make you sick right away. Other times you don't know that you are sick until months or even years later. That's why it's important to know about these hazards when you start a new job. Dealing with hazards. RACE is a commonly used process for dealing with hazards. These steps, when done in order, help the workplace identify and control hazards. RACE stands for Recognize, Assess, Control, Evaluate. Let's take a look at each step in more detail. Recognize where there are potential hazards in the workplace by watching the work as it's being done, talking to workers about the work and the areas where work happens, participating in workplace inspections, looking at reports and records that your workplace has about the work, and lastly, listening to the concerns workers have about the work they're doing. Assess. You need to understand how likely it is that a worker will get hurt or made sick by the hazard. To assess the hazard, ask these questions. How does the hazard compare to legislation, standards, and guidelines? How can a worker get hurt or sick? How likely is the hazard to affect worker health and safety? How badly could the worker get hurt or sick? Control the hazards by looking for ways to get rid of the hazard or to make the job safer. The safest thing to do is to remove the hazard. If removing the hazard is not possible, look for ways to prevent workers from coming in contact with the hazard, such as separating the hazard from the worker. If neither of the above solutions protects the worker, workers can use protective equipment, devices, and other materials to help keep them safe. Evaluate how well the hazard controls are working by talking about the work to the workers who report to you, watching workers do their work, listening to what they say, and look for ways to improve health and safety. Sometimes things go wrong. When that happens, you need to be clear on what steps you have to take. If someone you supervise gets injured, you must make sure the injured worker gets the necessary first aid and/or professional medical attention. Inform the employer of the incident so that the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development and other relevant parties can be notified. Secure the incident scene to prevent any further injuries and to help with the investigation of the incident. And lastly, Participate with the Joint Health and Safety Committee or Health and Safety Representative in the investigation of the incident. Handling problems as they arise. The RACE process is a way to help you deal with hazards, but it isn't everything. You also need to monitor the work. This means that you need take steps to make sure the workers understood the information you gave them and are following the workplace safety procedures and are using or wearing their protective equipment. Look out for hazards, and if you see a worker exposed to a hazard, talk to them about it. Make sure the OHSA, any applicable regulations, and the workplace safety procedures are being followed, and enforce those procedures. And lastly, listen to health and safety concerns or reports of a close call, as these are warning signs of potentially serious problems ahead. You also need to inform your employer of these concerns. That concludes Module 4. Please proceed to Module 5.